Hi, and welcome to my channel. My name is Lolix. Today, we'll be looking at the second extract in Part C of the listening section of a sample OET test. We'll follow the instructions provided and pause appropriately for each question to answer them. You should feel free to pause the video at any time to read the questions or to read the transcript of the speech.
Extract 2, questions 37 to 42. You hear a GP, called Dr. Edward Symes, giving a presentation about how the condition called myalgic encephalomyelitis, ME, affects young people. You now have 90 seconds to read questions 37 to 42.
Question 37. How did Dr. Symes feel about the girl called Emma having ME? A. Concerned about the effect it was having on her life. B. Curious about what her actual symptoms were. Or C. Upset about how her teachers had rejected it.
My name's Dr. Edward Symes, and I've come to talk to you today about a complex illness called myalgic encephalomyelitis, usually referred to as ME, and its effect on teenagers and adolescents. ME is a chronic neurological condition that affects many body systems, causing a variety of different symptoms, almost always including pain, feeling generally unwell, and sleep disturbance. I'd been working as a GP for about 20 years when my own daughter was 14 or 15, and one of her friends, let's call her Emma, was diagnosed with ME. She'd taken weeks off school, and none of her friends really knew what the problem was, other than that she was tired and not very well. The problem had started with a nasty bout of flu that she never fully recovered from. As time went on, Emma's friends seemed to abandon her one by one, as it became clear that even the shortest or most moderate forms of mental or physical exertion worsened her malaise and exhaustion. She ended up being excluded from almost every social activity, as she just couldn't cope with any exertion. The impact of this on her physical and mental health troubled me, as there seemed to be very little understanding and tolerance for her condition, and she was falling behind academically as well as socially.
Right there, we have the answer to question number 37. The doctor says in his speech, "The impact of this on her physical and mental health troubled me, as there seemed to be very little understanding and tolerance for her condition." So, in question number 37, we can see that option A, concerned about the effect it was having on her life. is a way to paraphrase what the doctor just said. So the answer to question number 37 is A. Question number 38. Dr. Symes decided to specialize in ME because he came to realize that A. No effective treatment existed for it. B. So many families were affected by it. And C. There was a lot of ignorance surrounding it.
It was a chance meeting that resulted in me deciding to specialize in ME. One day, I bumped into Emma's mom at the local pharmacy, and we ended up talking for almost an hour. She was clearly desperate for someone to talk to. It was having a huge effect on the family. She'd had to give up her job in order to take care of Emma, as her anxiety was made much worse by being at work when her daughter was sick and alone at home. It's well documented that ME is a physical disease, and there's no evidence whatsoever to suggest that it's psychological, but there's so much misinformation, and there's no therapy or cure.
Here, the doctor says that it's well documented that ME is a physical disease and that there's no evidence whatsoever to suggest that it was psychological, but there's so much misinformation and there's no therapy or cure. So that gives us the answer to question number 38, which is option C, that there is a lot of ignorance surrounding it. Question 39. Dr. Symes feels that a reliable diagnostic test for ME would be helpful because A. It could lead to the illness being taken more seriously. B. Patients could be educated to adjust to the illness. Or C. The severity of the patient's condition could be determined.
Emma's friends had apparently spoken about her skipping school or getting out of things that she didn't want to do. There seemed to be a general feeling that she should toughen up and get on with school life as they had to. As a result, poor Emma's confidence had hit rock bottom. She felt that people saw her as lazy or attention-seeking. That's when I decided to turn my attention to researching the illness. Somebody who's so ill shouldn't have to worry about proving it to everybody. Another extremely unhelpful aspect of the illness is that it's so difficult to diagnose. What we really need is a valid laboratory test we can use. At the moment, we just have to go through the patient's medical history, analyze their symptoms, and try to exclude other illnesses. Sadly, this often means that many young patients suffer the illness for years before they're diagnosed, which is a shame because an earlier diagnosis helps to reduce the impact through support and intervention. Another issue is that ME can be tricky to identify in younger patients as they don't always report symptoms accurately. The seriousness of the condition can be hard for them to judge, as they may think that feeling exhausted or ill is normal and have learned to pace themselves and simply take part in fewer activities than they would if they were well. A reliable blood test would avoid all of these problems and might mean that the illness finally gets the attention it deserves.
Here we have the answer to question number 39. As Dr. Symes says, a reliable blood test would avoid all of these problems and might mean that the illness finally gets the attention that it deserves. So the answer to question number 39 would be A. It could lead to the illness being taken more seriously. Question 40. Dr. Symes thinks that the most challenging aspect of the illness is the way A. It is exacerbated by social and psychological factors. B. Its effects on the individual can be difficult to predict. Or C. It places pressure on close relationships.
Perhaps the most challenging thing about having ME is the fact that it's so erratic. You just don't know how you'll be feeling at any given point in the future, which makes planning difficult. This often results in sufferers missing school and key social events. Feeling left out at a time when you're trying to establish your identity can trigger confusion and depression. And let's not forget that they do all of this on top of having to cope with debilitating medical symptoms. That's why I really want to emphasize that teenage sufferers require a lot of support and understanding from their families. For example, help with managing their social lives and visitors, because it can be difficult to keep friendships going.
Here we have the answer to question number 40. Now this can be a little bit confusing because the answer is not given specifically in the text. But one word that we have to pay attention to is at the very beginning, where the doctor says the most challenging thing about having ME is that it's so erratic. So the word to pay attention to is erratic. Erratic means that it can be difficult to predict. So the answer to question number 40 is B. Its effects on the individual can be difficult to predict. Question 41. What does Dr. Symes think GPs should do to help patients manage ME? A. Encourage them to have a healthy lifestyle. B. Ensure they understand how the illness develops. Or C. Continuously experiment with different approaches.
Another important point is that they shouldn't be put under too much academic stress, made to help out a lot at home, or keep up with physical exercise. A lot of parents think they should soldier on, but that's often the worst thing they can do. Trying to battle through is likely to lead to a total crash and a prolonged recovery. Sadly, there is no intervention or therapy for ME, but that doesn't mean that as health professionals, we can't help our patients to manage the symptoms and improve their quality of life. We need to be willing to try several and work out what makes the symptoms worse, what makes them better, and help the patient achieve a balance in their life so they can improve their daily function at such an important time.
Here we have the answer to question number 41, where Dr. Symes says that doctors need to be willing to try several treatments and work out what makes the symptoms worse, makes them better, and help the patient achieve a balance in their life. So the answer to question number 41 is C. Continuously experiment with different approaches. Question 42. What reservations does Dr. Symes have about the use of CBT? A. It can cause irreversible damage. B. It's inconsistent with what's known about the illness. Or C. More research needs to be carried out into the effectiveness.
Because the symptoms vary from patient to patient, there isn't one single method that can be used. Patients want and need a GP who at least validates the illness and acknowledges its effects. They also appreciate us providing ongoing support and regularly reviewing and monitoring progress. We should be giving appropriate documentation and information to the family and school so that our patients are more likely to be believed. The patients themselves need to be involved in the process and adapt to life with the illness by respecting their physical limits and allowing themselves adequate rest. Before I go, I want to briefly mention one controversial method of treatment that is sometimes prescribed, and that's cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. Whilst it's been helpful for some pediatric patients, the effects on teenagers are modest at best. Claims that it can cure the illness are not supported by any follow-up studies. The theory behind it is that the patient is so frightened of the illness that's usually brought on by exercise that it worsens their health. CBT can be used as a way of getting back into exercise. However, the illness cannot be worsened by attitudes, and this theory goes against current understanding of the disease. It has led to patients being blamed for their failure to recover, and even worse, it frequently leads to severe relapses, as it usually insists on some form of exercise.
Here, we have the answer to question number 42, when Dr. Symes says that the CBT theory goes against current understanding of the disease. Now that corresponds to option B, where it states that it's inconsistent with what's known about the illness. So the answer to question number 42 is B.
On a final, relatively positive note, I should say that the majority of severely affected adolescents make a full recovery, and most others improve sufficiently to lead near full lives.
With that, we conclude today's lesson. If you have any questions or doubts, please leave a comment. Thank you.